It is Monday, 8/7/2017. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. My apologies for the minor delay in the start today, but unfortunately, I neglected to import what we're going to play today into the appropriate directory. So I had to make a minor adjustment before we were able to finally get up with the ball and get rolling. And so yeah, I'm going to play something very, very special today. I won't take up the whole show, of course, and I won't be playing only this. I'll be doing my normal thing, but something very, very exciting happened today. Or no, did it? No, it happened yesterday. I lost all my patience for the large S of CDs I was going to order from Amazon, and I hadn't put through the order yet, and this album was actually a reason why I had originally delayed it, because it hadn't been out yet. And so yeah, I lost all patience in waiting to get around to making my purchase, and so I went ahead and went down to one of the few remaining CD stores still in existence, and I purchased 0 Days. They had exactly one copy. It was meant to be. It is here in my collection, and we are going to play it today. I've been waiting for just a little bit for this. I gotta tell you, Tommy has been so freaking active with making new music that I've hardly had time to like fall in love with any of the albums that he's done for the last, I want to say, since Power of the Damager. He's just been on this mad terror. I mean, mad terror. The longest gap he's had in there was, he had a little bit of a gap between Power of the Damager and I think it was Ruining Lives was the next. No, Carved into Stone was the next one. But then after that, Carved into Stone, Ruining Lives, No Absolutes, and now 0 Days. All in, I want to say it's been less than 4 years, but I mean it's pretty damn close, you know. And an LP a year, I mean that's a hell of a pace to keep up. Anyway, so it was Get Your Ass Kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday. I did manage to get in, and man, I did get my ass kicked. I didn't really go really hard. And I'm still trying to work my way back from an injury, so I'm still tacking out real easy and that kind of thing. But I gotta get away from my pressure play. I'm a pressure passer. Sorry, it's a habit that I picked up that it seems like the easiest pass for me, because I am kind of muscular. I got some muscle on me. But I've got to work on another pass technique, because I feel like this one, I feel like pressure passing all the time, it's taking away from my game too much, and it's one of those things where like it works when it works, you know, but when the other person knows how to deal with pressure, it doesn't work. You know, they shift their hips, they shift their shoulders, they buck, they do all kinds of things to throw your game off there and make it a little bit harder to pass that guard. I still managed to pass all the guards I was in today, but they weren't as strong as I am. So that to me is not a victory. Okay, when I can pass their guard with technique, that's a victory. That is a fucking victory. I'm not there yet, but I'm working toward it. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down some music, and as promised, I'm going to go ahead and throw down a song you may have heard off of 0 Days. This is, of course, assuming that you are a Prong fan at all. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw it on Divide and Conquer here on Coin Metal. And that was Duality by Slipknot. And yes, the thing I never wanted to happen in Bitcoin has finally happened. Segregated witness apparently was activated on the last the last block thing, and supposedly it's going to be fully engaged sometime in the near future, supposedly, I guess, by the end of this week or something like that. Personally, I don't know. I don't think that segregated witness was really needed, and ultimately I'm wondering what kind of effect it will have on Bitcoin. Personally, I think that it's setting it up for being taken over by banks, but that's just my impressions. You know, I'm not going to be, oh yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Fuck. Anybody who tells you what is going to happen in crypto, they're lying. Nobody knows. There are no fucking experts. There are people that know a lot of technical shit, but I wouldn't consider them to be experts. I mean, only because from what I've seen, even the experts of legacy markets are always wrong. You know, either that or they just don't tell you the truth because they're experts. and they run you into the wall all the time. You know, it's like I said to Peter Schiff. I told him that I couldn't tell if he was completely clueless or if he's like Ben Bernanke saying the fundamentals look solid right before the fucking crash in 2009. And literally, that's what the man said. He came to Congress and they're like, so, what's going on with the economy, guy? And he's like, the fundamentals are sound. I mean, and anybody who's watched The Big Short, you've seen what was going on, or at least a little bit of it. Now, if you can imagine that somebody who had the slightest inkling that kind of business was going on could go in front of Congress and say to them with a straight face, the fundamentals are sound. Give me a fucking break, man. You had credit ratings agencies tweaking the numbers just so they could keep their clients. I mean, give me a fucking break. And, you know, it's like they want to take the market and keep it in that kind of state of just opinion-based bullshit, you know, so they could just, like, say whatever, whenever, just to get by or just to get people off their ass and everything is fine. We just write some more zeros on the balance sheet. Everything's all good. You know? It's like I really think that when I look at the things that are being addressed in cryptocurrencies, these were all things that were features of Bitcoin. You know, things like reversible transactions. It was a feature of Bitcoin. It is a feature of cryptocurrencies that they're immutable. That if the miners are mining and they're verifying transactions, not just the block headers and whatnot, that they're actually processing the transactions, that, hey man, if you had the money on one side, it goes through on the other. No problem. Kind of lost it there for a moment. It's that scissor hash. Deadly stuff. Anywho, I don't know. I think that it was a poor decision, and I think that the fact that it was lied about by everybody the entire time, and those of you who doubt me, I mean, you can go ahead and doubt me all you want. The fact of the matter is, when I've tried to participate by asking very, very simple questions, I mean, and trying to take as much characterization out of them as possible, just simple yes-no questions, and people were blocking me on Twitter over this shit, and downvoting me all over fucking Reddit for it. So, I gotta wonder, why? Why would you do that? If what you're doing is legitimate, what you're doing is above board, why are you trying to delete debate as though it's not happening, or simply avoid it, or block people who are asking you inconvenient questions? If you're being perfectly honest, these aren't things you do. If you're being perfectly honest, you address the shit head on, you neutralize it, and then you move on to the real shit. You know, I mean, if it's not a concern, point the person in the correct direction and walk forward and, you know, keep going. But I wasn't even getting that. The few people that would answer me with stuff would point me towards the Segregated Witness white paper or the Lightning Network white paper. And from the fact that they sent me to it, it tells me that they didn't even read it. Because if they had read it, they would have been able to answer my question, or they would have told the truth, one of the two. You know, they would have been able to answer the question from the paper. They couldn't. They just direct you to the paper. Oh, yeah, I gave it a glance. Some friend told me about it. Here's the link, go to it. I didn't bother reading it, but here, I'm so much smarter than you. You should read it. Give me a fucking break. And when I was getting that kind of treatment, I don't get it anymore because they've all blocked me on fucking Twitter and all that shit. But it just, like I said, I find it kind of annoying because it's saying to me, I don't have a response. I'm a fucking idiot. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Because otherwise you would be able to address it straight on. But no, you couldn't. In any case, enough of that bullshit. Oh, for those of you who are following Game of Thrones, I was just reminded of it by a picture on my Twitter feed here. I think it's getting kind of exciting now. I would have liked to have seen something going on with Daenerys and Jon Snow, but I don't know. I guess that's something for a finale or something. I don't know. Anyway, regardless of segregated witness and all that, the Fed has been continuing to print money, and so, of course, Bitcoin is continuing to elevate in price, and I'm sure some of it's institutional buyers. I know for a fact it is. Shit, one of the Rothschilds, or a guy named Rothschild, supposedly bought $210,000 worth of Bitcoin. Give me a break. It was trying to convince us that wasn't a Rothschild, as in somebody from the Rothschild family. Give me a fucking break. But anyway, we've been seeing more and more institutional interest in cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and of course they've said all kinds of stupid things to give you the impression that they're not interested in it and that it's not something on their radar. But the fact of the matter is that they're behind the scenes. They've been getting involved in this shit. I mean, shit, if you've been following R3 at all, you know that Goldman Sachs was a member, Chase was a member, and there were a few others that have since dropped out. But don't make any mistake. I mean, Goldman Sachs, they're kind of like the CIA, that like once you're in Goldman Sachs, you're always a company man. There's no point after you're employed there that you're not always a company man. You know, they might call you up and have you do special things for them, but they won't count you on the regular books. Anyway, what I'm getting to there is that I'm sure that they left plenty of personnel from their projects nestled into either other projects or subsidiaries that have them as maybe unmarked investors or undisclosed partners or some such. You know, or they're some executive's kids project or something like that. But the point being that they are still involved. And I saw this article here on CoinDesk, and I just can't help but just sit here and look at it. I never thought we'd actually get to this point, because I figured that the Fed or the institutional players wouldn't be able to game the gold market this hard, but apparently they can. But check this out. This is on CoinDesk. It was written by Pete Rizzo. I'm going to go by the name Yes Penis. August 7th, 2017. Bitcoin is now worth nearly 3 times more than an ounce of gold. More than 5 months after Bitcoin and gold prices hit parity, Bitcoin is now worth nearly 3 times as much as the more traditional store of value. The price of Bitcoin reached a new high above $3,400 during today's session, a figure that was more than $2,000 above the price of gold. At press time, the precious metal was trading at $12.57, according to a spot exchange rate provided by Bloomberg. Overall, it's the latest sign that the cryptocurrency asset class may be maturing in the eyes of an increasingly professional set of investors. Earlier today, the total value of all publicly traded cryptocurrencies set a new all-time high, rising above $117 billion for the first time. But while largely symbolic, the finding is notable given that Bitcoin enthusiasts have long compared the digital asset to gold, arguing that it is a more effective store of value due to its digital and provably finite nature. Still, it remains difficult to determine whether the two assets have any relationship in the market, with past attempts to draw a correlation largely coming up empty. A CoinDesk report from July of last year found that despite the fact they are both considered safe havens, there is hardly any similarity in market movements. Yes, very astute observations, Pete. I'll be perfectly honest. You want another relationship between gold and Bitcoin? The US dollar. Do you need to think a little bit harder about it to figure that one out? Come on now. If gold is valuated in a currency, and then a cryptocurrency is valuated in that same currency, then the relationship between them is the mediating currency, which is the US dollar. And as I pointed out several times on this show, this is the fact that makes it absolutely impossible to attach a cryptocurrency to a physical commodity. Impossible! Cannot be done. It can all be spoofed. It can all be fucked with. You can't do it. Don't even bother. I have to say it again and again, and I'm sure in a year or two there will be another spate of these fucking commodity-backed cryptocurrencies, or at least that'll be the claim. That'll be the silver, gold, or A10, or some other fictitious unobtainium. And what makes me laugh even more is the ICOs that are tied into it. Come on now. Now we're at a fourth layer of abstraction of value. Think about it, okay? Because we're talking about an ICO token that's valuated in what? Ethereum, which in order to get an appropriate exchange rate in fiat, you either have to go to an exchange that does pairings between Ethereum and US dollar, or you have to go token, Ethereum, Bitcoin, and then US dollar. Fourth layer abstraction. There's a lot of fuckery available in those 4 layers, let me tell you. I mean, starting with the token itself. The authors of the token, or curators, or whatever the fuck the ICO leaders are, they can arbitrarily create more tokens. Okay, so there's a question mark. Is the same thing true of Ethereum? I'm not entirely certain, but I do know that the value of Ethereum is just as volatile as Bitcoin or any other currency. So that's a question mark, because the stability of the exchange rate between your token and Ethereum is now in question. And of course that was drawn into question by the fact that you can just piss out more tokens at will. And then we go to Bitcoin, which at the moment is a big fucking question mark. Why? Because now we have Bitcoin and we have Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, we have Segwit Coin and we have Bitcoin Cash. And there's a power balance, I would say, developed between the two. It appears that BCC is actually leveled off and started appreciating in value lately. And I expect this trend to continue. So you've got a floating valuation between Bitcoin and Ethereum, so that's another question mark. And then with regard to the US dollar, not only do you have a varying exchange rate between US dollars and Bitcoin, you have an undefined total sum of US dollars in circulation, in existence, and in circulation. So now we're up to 4 question marks, all of which we don't have to deal with. You know, you can just deal with the cryptocurrency and buy and sell things for it. I mean, we can have the exchange rate and that, you know, that that works and all that, but an exchange rate is good for 2 things. It's good for defining a rate of exchange between 2 currencies, and it is also good for valuating an existing object in a different currency. Yeah, think about it. You've got the exchange rate for Bitcoin and Verge at, let's see, what is it right now? Last time I checked, it was, I think, 101? Let's see, where is it at right now? Oh, I'm looking at Bitcoin Cash. And so Verge. Yeah, I've only got buy orders available for Verge right now. So we're down to 93 on Verge, and I was kind of expecting that, so I've been holding some funds aside. But anyway, so you've got an exchange rate, though, between Bitcoin and Verge. So if I'm buying something off of you, and it's a Bitcoin, it'll probably be close to 1 million Verge. So now, you know, if you're willing to accept that fact, you know, you have something that I want, and I have a lot of Verge, I could buy it off of you for that Verge. Assuming, of course, you would be willing to take the Verge. And I expect that in the future somebody will take Verges as a regular currency. Because I think the anonymity in transactions is and will be a recurring issue, something that we'll want to have because of it, at least until we get through this period. And I don't really anticipate a reality in which any altcoins will simply disappear, be made illegal, or disappear because they've been made illegal or whatever. I just don't see it happening. You know, I see too much social dispersion. You know, I've been talking about how how we're in a period of dispersion, you know, where things are trying to find other routes to achieve the same goals, you know, and, you know, existence and prosperity being among them, you know. But because we're at this point where things are looking for another way to go, and we exist in such a position to be able to provide the means to do so pretty fucking anonymously, if not completely anonymously, and privately, I don't see a time when that's going to go away. I mean, we had a Mirataki recently had just come back from the Middle East, and I guess he was part of some autonomous region project or something like that. I don't know the details behind it, but he was trying to facilitate the use of cryptocurrencies amongst them and encourage that. And when you hear about those things, and then people seasteading and so on and so forth, you start to understand that there are new niches developing within our existing culture, our existing society, that will readily take up cryptocurrencies as a way to simply disengage from the existing one entirely. I mean, imagine if seasteading groups were able to set up some sort of production capacity on something and then introduce themselves to the rest of the world market and their products to the rest of the world market via the internet and transacting solely in cryptocurrencies. I mean, if they could produce enough products to keep any kind of market sustained, that would be a little niche that would be really hard to get rid of in the future. I mean, first you'd have to take subs and sink all of them or something. I don't know. But I think skysteading will be a thing in the future too. People downplay the drone movement like it's gone away or something. I just watched that they're using gesture control now for these new drones, or this one new drone, and that's not going to go away either. And I expect that before we hit saturation on that, there will be people living permanently in the sky. I know, really pie in the sky, right? You never know. It might be a bakery, and they'll deliver down to us terrestrials, and they'll be, sky pies or something like that. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw in a little bit of music, and I want to play some more off of the new prong. And let's see here, recently added. I want to play some new prong, and let's see. I'm not even really that oriented with all the songs yet. I've only given it like 10 or 20 playthroughs so far, so I don't have it quite word for word in mind yet. Fuck it. How about The Whispers off of 0 Days here on Coin Metal? And that was Holy War's The Punishment Due by Megadeth. And as usual, the meandering drift through my Twitter feed, I swear I feel like a private investigator doing this show, because I'll be looking for stuff to do on the show at the time of the show, while the show is going, because I like the spontaneity of it. It's like I don't have song lists or things like that. But, one of these days, I want to have it to where I have the songs in the videos that I post up on YouTube. Because one thing that I think you guys might pick up on then is some of the song selection is very, very specific. And, if you're listening along, you catch these things occasionally, I'm sure. Little Easter eggs that I like to throw in there, something to go along with the general tone of the show at the time, But anyway, like I said, as a private investigator and internet scourer while I'm on this show, I pick up on a few things, and one thing, this is completely offhand, because, but it was something I wanted to bring up because I thought it was funny as fuck. Anyway, for those of you who are old enough to remember Metallica used to be the shit, right? And back then, they came out with an album that was revolutionary. As a matter of fact, it still affects us to this very day. I should probably play more of it on this show. I don't, because for whatever reason, it's not in my pewter. Anyway, it's Injustice for All. And there was a certain someone that really helped with the culmination of that album, and I think one of Metallica's biggest mistakes was drifting from using him as their producer, and that was Mr. Flemming Rasmussen. And I know he's still involved in producing, just from the stuff I've been able to find out about him from his Facebook page. But anyway, somebody had posted on a Meshuggah group that something to the effect of, if there was a well, shit, I'm right here. I might as well just read it. Scroll. It's a really, really long one. Who do you guys think should produce the next Meshuggah album? And given Injustice for All, I have to say Flemming Rasmussen. I think he's like one of the few guys who could understand the complexity. I mean, Devin Townsend is another choice. Although my problem with Devin is that I think he might inspire them to go a little bit too funky. Maybe Les Claypool or Flemming Rasmussen. Or Trent Reznor. I think Trent and Meshuggah could really come up with some really fucking awesome shit. But I definitely think, for the type of band that they are, and the fact that Injustice for All, I imagine in my mind that Injustice for All was in the can when Cliff died, right? So this is just like some dream world that I came up with, where Cliff didn't die. All right, he made it through the Master of Puppets tour. They came out with Injustice for All after that, and then the next album after that, where I think they would have gone after Injustice for All, was Destroy, Erase, Improve by Meshuggah. That album, to me, it's like a really seasoned, really mature Metallica, just taking everything they've learned from Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning and Injustice for All, and balled it up and refined it and just blew it through the harshest way they possibly could. They would have come up with Destroy, Erase, Improve as their next progression from Injustice for All. That's my feeling. That's my imaginary world where Cliff didn't die. Anyway, I think that Flemming, I really think that him working with Meshuggah, that would be fucking tits. That would be really fucking tits. But that's just my opinion. Either him or Les Claypool. I think Les could probably capture their funk and their what's that style? Jazz fusion shit, and really bring that out. And I don't know. The stuff that he was doing with Primus a long time ago with Jerry Was a Race Car Driver, fucking awesome song. Now imagine that mind with the technicality and the skill of Meshuggah. I don't think you could. I can't. Anyway, I'm kind of distracting myself because while I was mining away on my Twitter feed, I of course went to CoinDesk's website and I came across this very short article, and I found a piece of legislation that I'm probably going to spend the rest of the show reading. And that's why we've been a little bit long on music, I guess. I know that's why on the last music break we went 4 songs, because I had to get stoned enough to be able to read legislation. It's just how it is. Anyway, here it is. This was on CoinDesk, and I just want to point out before I read this, you'll notice the timing. Segregated witness was just witnessed, right? Here we go. CoinDesk.com. Controversial U.S. sanctions bill calls for cryptocurrency research. And this was on August 7th. Stan Higgins. A foreign sanctions bill signed into law by U.S. President Donald Trump included a little notice provision on cryptocurrencies. The U.S. Congress cleared the bill late last month, imposing sanctions on Russia, Iran, and North Korea. It was a politically controversial development given ongoing investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, which are entirely bullshit, and the stated opposition of the Trump administration to the legislation. I second that motion. Trump ultimately signed the bill into law last week, though he sharply criticized the measure in an accompanying signing statement. Notably for the blockchain industry, however, is that the bill includes a mandate for the development of a national security strategy aimed at, quote, combating the financing of terrorism and related forms of illicit finance. One provision which focuses on research into illicit finance trends mentions cryptocurrencies as an area of study. The text calls for, quote, a discussion of and data regarding trends in illicit finance, including evolving forms of value transfer such as so-called cryptocurrencies, other methods that are computer, telecommunications, or internet-based, cybercrime, or any other threats that the Secretary may choose to identify. Sounds like a magic wand to me. The initial draft strategy is due to Congress within the next year, according to the bill's text, and it is set to include input from U.S. financial regulators, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, among others. In some ways, the new bill echoes another submitted in May as part of a wider Department of Homeland Security legislative package. That measure, as CoinDesk reported at the time, calls for research into the potential use of cryptocurrencies by terrorists. Like the DHS bill, the new sanctions law doesn't constitute a shift in policy, but rather indicates that Congress is taking steps to explore the issue more closely. Thank you, Stan. Let's see what the comments look like. A mandate for the development of national social doesn't concern me. They look at it all they want. Yeah. You know, my feeling on this whole thing is that it's completely misconstrued. You know, it's back to that idea that cryptocurrencies are somehow political. They aren't political, they're economic. And just because we want economics based on facts, mathematical fact, versus mandate on high, that doesn't make it political, it makes it economic. You know, we're interested in truer forms of money. You know, there's this push to digital currencies. Well, hey, we're a step ahead of you, or 8,000. You know, we've developed our payment networks. We can circumvent any embargo or any of that other bullshit, not because that's what it's meant to do. It's just that it can do it. And I see ahead in the mentality of this that they're somehow going to control it like, I don't know, like pot. That they're going to be busting down doors and shooting at people and shit like that. And I'll tell you what, if it goes kinetic, they will go broke. Completely and utterly broke trying to enforce this shit. And I haven't even read it yet, but what I see with regard to the associations being made here is that it's like, oh, this is outside of our control, so this is terrorists. It's like, dude, my heart rate is outside of your control. Is it terrorist too? Anyway, this thing is 70 pages long. We may or may not get all the way through it, but we are going to fucking try. And so, let's get a little bit inflated on the side so we can read it nice and relaxed. And this is a bipartisan bill, so for all of you who still associate in the names in our Congress with Democrat and Republican, and yourselves with either Democrat or Republican, know that this is both parties. This is a bipartisan bill. So, fuck all of them. Here we go. 115th Congress of the United States of America at the first session, begun and held at the City of Washington on Tuesday, the 3rd day of January 2017. An act to provide congressional review and to counter aggression by the governments of Iran, the Russian Federation, and North Korea, and for other purposes. And we gotta inflate this thing even bigger because they like variants of fonts, and I couldn't judge by the one I had available. So, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title, table of contents. We're not going to read through the table of contents. We're just going to take it as it comes. And a lot of table of contents here. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, here we go. Down to the meat of it. Well, that pissed away at least 2 pages of it. Hopefully there's more of that coming. Title 1. Sanctions with respect to Iran. Section 101, short title. This one's, more fucking bullshit. Okay. This title may be cited as the, quote, Countering Iran's Destabilizing Activities Act of 2017. Section 102, definitions. In this title, number 1, act of international terrorism. The term, quote, act of international terrorism has the meaning given that term in Section 14 of the Iran Sanctions Act of 1996, Public Law 104-172, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note. Number 2, appropriate congressional committees, yes. The term appropriate for congressional committees has the meaning given that term in Section 14 of the Iran Sanctions Act of 1996, Public Law 104-172, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note. Number 3, foreign person. The term foreign person means a person that is not a United States person. What's a United States person? I thought we were civilians, or citizens, rather. Number 4, Iranian person. The term Iranian person means A, an individual who is a citizen or national of Iran, or B, an entity organized under the laws of Iran or otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the government of Iran. Number 5, IRGC. The term IRGC means Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And scroll. HR 3364-4, knowingly. The term, quote, knowingly has the meaning given that term in the Section 14 of the Iran Sanctions Act of 1996. Not going to read the rest of it. 7. United States person. The term, quote, United States person means A United States citizen or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence to the United States, or B, an entity organized under the laws of the United States or any jurisdiction within the United States, including a foreign branch of such an entity. Section 103, Regional Strategy for Countering Conventional and Asymmetric Iranian Threats in the Middle East and North Africa. A. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and every 2 years thereafter, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Director of National Intelligence shall jointly develop and submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a strategy for deterring conventional and asymmetric Iranian activities and, quote, threats that directly threaten the United States and key allies in the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. B. Elements. The strategy required by subsection A shall include at a minimum the following. Number 1, a summary of the near and long-term United States objectives, plans, and means for countering Iran's destabilizing activities, including identification of countries that share the objective of countering Iran's destabilizing activities. Number 2, a summary of the capabilities and contributions of individual countries and shared efforts to counter Iran's destabilizing activities, and a summary of additional actions or contributions that each country could take further to further contribute. Number 3, an assessment of Iran's conventional force capabilities and an assessment of Iran's plans to upgrade its conventional force capabilities, including its acquisition, development, and deployment of ballistic and cruise missile capabilities, unmanned aerial vehicles, and maritime offense and anti-access or aerial denial capabilities. Let me make this a little bit longer here. Come on. Work with me here. Number 4, an assessment of Iran's chemical and biological weapons capabilities and an assessment of Iran's plans to upgrade its chemical or biological weapons capabilities. Number 5, an assessment of Iran's asymmetric activities in the region, including A, the size, capabilities, and activities of the IRGC, including the Quds Force. B, the size, capabilities, and activities of Iran's cyber operations. C, the types and amount of support, including funding, lethal and non-lethal contributions, and training provided to Hezbollah, Hamas, special groups in Iraq, the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Houthi fighters in Yemen, and other violent groups across the Middle East. And D, the scope and objectives of Iran's information operations and use of propaganda. HR 3364 5. Number 6, a summary of the United States actions unilaterally and in cooperation with foreign governments to counter destabilizing Iranian activities, including A, interdiction of Iranian lethal arms bound for groups designated as foreign terrorist organizations under Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1189. B, Iran's interference in international commercial shipping lanes. C, attempts by Iran to undermine or subvert internationally recognized governments in the Middle East region. And D, Iran's support for the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, including financial assistance, military equipment, personnel, and other support provided to that regime, and support and direction to other armed actors that are not Syrian or Iranian and are acting on behalf of that regime. C. Form of strategy. The strategy required by subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form but may include a classified annex. D. Appropriate congressional committees and leadership defined. In this section, the term appropriate congressional committees and leadership means number 1, the Committee on Finance, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Foreign Relations, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate. Number 2, the Committee on Ways and Means, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. Section 104. Imposition of additional sanctions in response to Iran's ballistic missile program. A. Sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress that the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of the State should continue to implement Executive Order number 13382, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note, relating to the blocking property of weapons of mass destruction delivery system proliferators and their supporters. B. Imposition of sanctions. The President shall impose sanctions described in subsection C with respect to any person that the President determines on or after the date of the enactment of this act. Number 1, knowingly engages in any activity that materially contributes to the activities of the government of Iran with respect to its ballistic missile program or any other program in Iran for developing, deploying, or maintaining systems capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction, including any efforts to manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer, or use such capabilities. Number 2, is a successor entity to a person referred to in paragraph 1. Number 3, owns or controls or is owned or controlled by a person referred to in paragraph number 1. Number 4, forms an entity with the purpose of evading sanctions that would otherwise be imposed pursuant to paragraph 3. 5, is acting for or on behalf of a person referred to in paragraph 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 6, knowingly provides or attempts to provide financial, material, technological, or other support or goods or services in support of a person referred to in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. C. Sanctions described. The sanctions described in this subsection are the following. Number 1, blocking of property. The President shall block in accordance with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 50 U.S.C. 1701 all transactions in all property and interest in property of any person subject to subsection B. If such property and interests in property are in the United States, come within the United States, or come within the possession or control of a United States person. Number 2, exclusion from the United States. The Secretary of State shall deny a visa to, and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall exclude from the United States any person subject to subsection B that is an alien. D. Penalties. A person that violates, attempts to violate, conspires to violate, or causes a violation of subsection C1 or any regulation, license, or order issued to carry out that subsection shall be subject to the penalty set forth in subsections B and C of Section 206 of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to the same extent as a person that commits an unlawful act described in subsection A of that section. E. Report on contributions to Iran's ballistic missile program. In general, not later than 100 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report describing each person that A. has, during the period specified in paragraph 2, conducted any activity that has materially contributed to the activities of the government of Iran with respect to its ballistic missile program or any other program in Iran for developing, deploying, or maintaining systems capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction, including any efforts to manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer, or use such capabilities. B is a successor entity to a person referred to in subparagraph A. C owns or controls, or is owned or controlled by a person referred to in subparagraph A. D forms an entity with the purpose of evading sanctions that could be imposed as a result of a relationship described in subparagraph C. E is acting for or on behalf of a person referred to in paragraph A, B, C, or D, or F is known or believed to have provided or attempted to provide during the period specified in paragraph 2 financial, material, technological, or other support for or goods or services in support of any material contribution to a program described in subparagraph A carried out by a person described in subparagraph A, B, C, D, or E. 2. Period specified. The period specified in this paragraph is A. In the case of the first report submitted under paragraph 1, the period beginning January 1st, 2016 and ending on the date the report is submitted, and B. In the case of a subsequent such report, the 180-day period preceding the submission of the report. 3. Form of a report. Each report required by paragraph 1 shall be submitted in unclassified form but may include a classified annex. Section 105. Imposition of terrorism-related sanctions with respect to the IRGC. A. Findings. Congress makes the following findings. Number 1. The IRGC is subject to sanctions pursuant to Executive Order Number 13382, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note relating to the blocking property of weapons of mass destruction delivery system proliferators and their supporters. The Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act of 2010, 22 U.S.C. 8501, Executive Order 13553, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note relating to blocking property of certain persons with respect to serious human rights abuses by the government of Iran. The Executive Order Number 13606, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note relating to the blocking the property and suspending entry into the United States of certain persons with respect to grave human rights abuses by the governments of Iran and Syria via information technology. Number 2. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, in this section referred to as the IRGC-QF, is the primary arm of the government of Iran for executing its policy of supporting terrorist and insurgent groups. The IRGC-QF provides material, logistical assistance, training, and financial support to militants and terrorist operatives throughout the Middle East and South Asia, and was designated for the imposition of sanctions by the Secretary of the Treasury pursuant to Executive Order Number 13224, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note relating to the blocking property and prohibiting transactions with persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism in October of 2007 for its support of terrorism. Number 3, the IRGC, not just the IRGC-QF, is responsible for implementing Iran's international program of destabilizing activities, support for acts of international terrorism, and ballistic missile program. B, in general, beginning on the date that is 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, the President shall impose the sanctions described in subsection C with respect to the IRGC and foreign persons that are officials, agents, or affiliates of the IRGC. C. Sanctions described. The sanctions described in the subsections are sanctions applicable with respect to a foreign person pursuant to the Executive Order 13324, 50 U.S.C. 1701 note, relating to blocking property and prohibiting transactions with persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism. Section 106. Imposition of additional sanctions with respect to persons responsible for human rights abuses. I wonder if that includes our own government. A. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and annually thereafter, the Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a list of each person the Secretary determines based on credible evidence on or after the date of the enactment of this act. Number 1. Is responsible for extrajudicial killings, torture, or other gross violations of internationally recognized human rights committed against individuals in Iran who seek A. to expose illegal activity carried out by officials of the government of Iran, or B. to obtain, exercise, defend, or promote internationally recognized human rights and freedoms such as the freedoms of religion, expression, association, and assembly, and the rights to a fair trial and democratic elections. Or, number 2, acts as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign person in a matter relating to an activity described in paragraph 1. B. Sanctions described. Number 1. In general, the President may, in accordance with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701, block all transactions and all property and interests in property of a person on the list required by subsection A if such property and interests in property are in the United States, come within the United States, or are or come within the possession or control of a United States person. Number 2, penalties. A person that violates, attempts to violate, conspires to violate, or causes a violation of paragraph 1 or any regulation, license, or order issued to carry out paragraph 1 shall be subject to the penalties set forth in subsections B and C of section 206 of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701, to the same extent as a person that commits an unlawful act described in subsection A of that section. Section 107, enforcement of arms embargoes. A. In general, except as provided in subsection D, the President shall impose the sanctions described in subsection B with respect to any person that the President determines. Number 1, knowingly engages in any activity that materially contributes to the supply, sale, or transfer directly or indirectly to or from Iran, or for the use in or benefit of Iran of any battle tanks, armored combat vehicles, large caliber artillery systems, combat aircraft, attack helicopters, warships, missiles, or missile systems as defined for the purpose of the United Nations Register of Conventional Arms or related material, including spare parts, or number 2, knowingly provides to Iran any technical training, financial resources or services, advice or other services or assistance related to the supply, sale, transfer, manufacture, maintenance, or use of arms and related material described in paragraph 1. B. Sanctions described. Number 1. Blocking of property. The President shall block, in accordance with International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701, all transactions in all property and interests in property of any person subject to subsection A, if such property and interests in property are in the United States, come within the United States, or come within the possession or control of a United States person. Number 2, exclusion from the United States. The Secretary of the State shall deny a visa to, and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall exclude from the United States any person subject to subsection A that is an alien. Dude, what is it with fucking aliens and these people? C. Penalties. A person that violates, attempts to violate, conspires to violate, or causes a violation of subsection B1 or any regulation, license, or order issued to carry out that subsection shall be subject to the penalties set forth in subsections B and C of Section 206 of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701, to the same extent as a person that commits an unlawful act described in subsection A of that section. D. Exemption? The President is not required to impose sanctions under subsection A with respect to a person for engaging in an activity described in that subsection if the President certifies to the appropriate congressional committees that, number 1, permitting the activity is in the national security interests of the United States. Number 2, Iran no longer presents a significant threat to the national security of the United States and to the allies of the United States. And number 3, the government of Iran has ceased providing operational or financial support for acts of international terrorism and no longer satisfies the requirements for designation as a state sponsor of terrorism, which I think we qualify for. E. State sponsor of terrorism defined. In this section, the term state sponsor of terrorism means a country, the government of which the Secretary of State has determined to be a government that has repeatedly provided support for acts of international terrorism for the purposes of, number 1, Section 6J1A of the Export Administration Act of 1979, 50 U.S.C. 4605 J1A, as continued in effect pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701. Number 2, Section 620A, the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, 22 U.S.C. 2371A. Number 3, Section 40D of the Arms Export Control Act, 22 U.S.C. 2780D, or 4, any other provision of law. Section 108. Review of applicability of sanctions relating to Iran's support for terrorism and its ballistic missiles program. A. In general, not later than 5 years after the date of the enactment of this act, the President shall conduct a review. Whoa. Not later than 5 years. You actually have to be doing a second term to be in year 5, dude. Weird. Not later than 5 years after the date of the enactment of this act, the President shall conduct a review of all persons on the list of specially designated nationals and blocked persons maintained by the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the Department of the Treasury for activities relating to Iran. Number 1, to assess the conduct of such persons as that conduct relates to A. Any activity that materially contributes to the activities of the government of Iran with respect to its ballistic missile program, or B. support by the government of Iran for acts of international terrorism, and number 2, to determine the applicability of sanctions with respect to such persons under A. Executive Order 13382, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note, relating to blocking property of weapons of mass destruction delivery system proliferators and their supporters, or B. Executive Order 13224, 50 U.S.C. 1701, note relating to the blocking property and prohibiting transactions with persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism. B. Implementation of sanctions. If the President determines under subsection A that sanctions under an executive order specified in paragraph 2 of that subsection are applicable with respect to a person, the President shall, number 1, impose sanctions with respect to that person pursuant to that executive order, or number 2, exercise the waiver authority provided under section 112. Section 109. Report on coordination of sanctions between the United States and the European Union. A. In general, not later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report that includes the following. Number 1, a description of each instance during the period specified in subsection B.A. in which the United States has imposed sanctions with respect to a person for activity related to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or delivery systems for such weapons to or by Iran, support for acts under international terrorism by Iran, or human rights abuses in Iran, but in which the European Union has not imposed corresponding sanctions, and B, in which the European Union has imposed sanctions with respect to a person for activity related to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or delivery systems for such weapons to or by Iran, support for acts of international terrorism by Iran or human abuses in Iran, but in which the United States has not imposed corresponding sanctions. 2. An explanation for the reason for each discrepancy between sanctions imposed by the European Union and the sanctions imposed by the United States described in subparagraphs A and B of paragraph 1. B. Period specified. The period specified in this subsection is: Number 1, in the case of the first report submitted under subsection A, the period beginning on the date of the enactment of this act and ending on the date the report is submitted, and B, number 2, in the case of a subsequent such report, the 180-day period preceding the submission of the report. What if they never submit a report? C. Form of report. The report required by subsection A shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex. Section 110. Report on the United States citizens detained by Iran. A. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a report on the United States citizens, including United States citizens who are also citizens of other countries, detained by Iran or groups supported by Iran. That includes, number 1, information regarding any officials of the government of Iran involved in any way in the detentions, and number 2, a summary of efforts the United States government has taken to secure swift release of those United States citizens. B. Form of report. The report required by subsection A shall be submitted in an unclassified form but may include a classified annex. C. Appropriate congressional committees and leadership defined. In this section, the term appropriate congressional committees and leadership means, number 1, the Committee on Finance, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Foreign Relations, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, and number 2, the Committee on Ways and Means, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. Section 111. Exemptions for national security and humanitarian assistance, rule of construction. A. In general, the following activities shall be exempt from sanctions under Sections 104, 105, 106, and 107. Number 1, any activity subject to the reporting requirements under Title 5 of the National Security Act of 1947, 50 U.S.C. 3091, or to any authorized intelligence activities of the United States. So I guess the CIA is scot-free, right? Number 2, the admission of an alien to the United States if such admission is necessary to comply with the United States obligations under the agreement between the United Nations and the United States of America regarding the headquarters of the United Nations, signed at Lake Success, June 26, 1947, and entered into force November 21, 1947, under the Convention and Consular Relations done at Vienna, April 24, 1963, and entered into force March 19, 1967, under other applicable international obligations of the United States. Gosh, I wonder what happened on March 19th. 3. The conduct or facilitation of a transaction for the sale of agricultural commodities, food, medicine, or medical devices to Iran, or for the provision of humanitarian assistance to the people of Iran, including engaging in financial transaction relating to humanitarian assistance or for humanitarian purposes, or transporting goods or services that are necessary to carry out operations relating to humanitarian assistance or humanitarian purposes. So I guess we can still go over to Iran and promote Bitcoin, because that's a humanitarian thing. B. Implementation. The President may exercise all authorities provided under Sections 203 and 205 of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1702 and 1704, to carry out this act. C. Rule of construction. Nothing in this act shall be construed to limit the authority of the President under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701. D. Definitions. In this section, number 1, agricultural commodity. The term agricultural commodity has the meaning given to that term in Section 102 of the Agricultural Trade Act of 1978, U.S.C. 5602. Number 2, good. The term good has the meaning given that term in Section 16 of the Export Administration Act of 1979, 50 U.S.C. 4618, as continued, in effect pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701. Number 3, medical device. The term medical device has the meaning given to the term device in Section 201 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, 21 U.S.C. 321. 4. Medicine. The term medicine has the meaning given to the term drug, quote-unquote drug, in Section 201 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, 21 U.S.C. 321. Section 112. Presidential Waiver Authority. A. Case-by-case waiver authority. Number 1. In general, the President may waive, on a case-by-case basis, and for a period of not more than 180 days, a requirement under Section 104, 105, 106, 107, or 108 to impose or maintain sanctions with respect to a person, and may waive the continued imposition of such sanctions not less than 30 days after the President determines and reports to the appropriate congressional committees that it is vital to the national security interests of the United States to waive such sanctions. Hey Don, am I cool? He's good. Number 2. Renewal of waivers. The President may, on a case-by-case basis, renew a waiver under paragraph 1 for the additional period of not more than 180 days if, not later than 15 days before that waiver expires, the President makes the determination and submits to the appropriate congressional committees a report described in paragraph 1. Number 3. Successive renewal. The renewal authority provided under paragraph 2 may be exercised for additional successive periods of not more than 180 days if the President follows the procedures set forth in paragraph 2 and submits the report described in paragraph 1 for each such renewal. B. Contents of waiver reports. Each report submitted under subsection A in connection with a waiver of sanctions under Section 104, 105, 106, 107, or 108 with respect to a person or the renewal of such a waiver shall include, number 1, a specific and detailed rationale for the determination that the waiver is vital to the national security interests of the United States. Number 2, a description of the activity that resulted in the person being subject to sanctions. Number 3, an explanation of any efforts made by the United States as applicable to secure the cooperation of the government with primary jurisdiction over the person or location where the activity described in paragraph 2 occurred, in terminating or, as appropriate, penalizing the activity. And number 4, an assessment of the significance of the activity described in paragraph 2 in contributing to the ability of Iran to threaten the interests of the United States or allies of the United States, develop systems capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction, support acts of international terrorism, or violate the human rights of any person in Iran. C. Effective report on waiver. If the President submits a report under subsection A in connection with a waiver of sanctions under Section 104, 105, 106, 107, or 108, with respect to a person or the renewal of such a waiver, the President shall not be required to impose or maintain sanctions under Section 104, 105, 106, 107, or 108 as applicable with respect to the person described in the report during the 30-day period referred to in subsection A. Title II. Sanctions with respect to the Russian Federation and combining terrorism and illicit financing. This is the only place where those two actually have a connection, by the way. Section 201. Short title. This title may be cited as the, quote, Countering Russian Influence in Europe and Eurasia Act of 2017. Yeah, good luck. Subsection A, sanctions and other measures with respect to the Russian Federation. Section 211, findings. Congress makes the following findings. Number 1, on March 6, 2014, President Barack Obama issued Executive Order 13660, 79 Fed Reg 13493, relating to blocking property of certain persons contributing to the situation in Ukraine, which authorizes the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, to impose sanctions on those determined to be undermining democratic processes and institutions in Ukraine or threatening the peace, security, stability, sovereignty, or territorial integrity of the Ukraine. President Obama subsequently issued Executive Order 13661, 79 Fed Reg 15535, relating to the blocking property of additional persons contributing to the situation in Ukraine, and Executive Order number 13662, 79 Fed Reg 16169, relating to the blocking property of additional persons contributing to the situation in the Ukraine, to expand sanctions on certain persons contributing to the situation in the Ukraine. Number 2, on December 18, 2014, the Ukrainian Freedom Support Act of 2014 was enacted, Public Law 113-272, 22 U.S.C. 8921, which includes provisions directing the President to impose sanctions on foreign persons that the President determines to be entities owned or controlled by the government of the Russian Federation or nationals of the Russian Federation that manufacture, sell, transfer, or otherwise provide certain defense articles to Syria. Number 3. On April 1, 2015, President Obama issued Executive Order number 13694, 80 Fed Reg 18077, relating to the blocking of property of certain persons engaging in significant malicious cyber-enabled activities, which authorizes the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, to impose sanctions on persons determined to be engaging in malicious cyber hacking. Number 4. On July 26, 2016, President Obama approved a presidential policy directive on United States cyber incident coordination, which states, quote, certain cyber incidents that have been significant impacts on an entity or national security or the broader economy require a unique approach to response efforts. Number 5. On December 29, 2016, President Obama issued an annex to Executive Order number 13694, which authorized sanctions on the following entities and individuals. A. The Main Intelligence Directorate, also known as Glavno I'm not even going to read that. Or the GRU. There we go. In Moscow, Russian Federation. B. The Federal Security Service, known as the FSB in Moscow, Russian Federation. Or C. The Special Technology Center, known as the STLC, Special Technology Center in St. Petersburg, Russian Federation. D. Zor Security, known as ESAGE Lab in Moscow, Russian Federation. E. The Autonomous Non-Commercial Organization, known as Professional Association of Designers of Data Processing Systems, also known as ANOPO-KSI, or ANOPO-KSI, in Moscow Federation. Whatever. F. Igor Kor. Are you kidding me? HI. There we go. 6. On February 6, 2017, an assessment of the United States intelligence community entitled, quote, Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent U.S. Elections stated, quote, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the United States presidential election. The assessment warns that, quote, Moscow will apply lessons learned from its Putin-ordered campaign aimed at the United States presidential election to future influence efforts worldwide, including against U.S. allies and their election processes. No more CIA involvement, I guess. Section 212, Sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress that the President, number 1, should continue to uphold and seek unity with European and other key partners on sanctions implemented against the Russian Federation, which have been effective and instrumental in countering Russian aggression in Ukraine. Number 2, should engage to the fullest extent possible with partner governments with regard to closing loopholes, including the allowance of extended prepayment for delivery of goods. And commodities and other loopholes. That's smart contracts for you people that aren't paying attention. In multilateral and unilateral restrictive measures against Russian Federation with the aim of maximizing alignment of those measures and with sanctions in place as of date of the enactment of this act with respect to the Russian Federation in response to the crisis in eastern Ukraine, cyber intrusions and attacks, and human rights violators in the Russian Federation. Part 1. Congressional Review of Sanctions Imposed with Respect to the Russian Federation. Section 215, short title. This part may be cited as the Russian Sanctions Review Act of 2017. Section 216, Congressional Review of Certain Actions Relating to the Sanctions Imposed with Respect to the Russian Federation. A. Submission to Congress of Proposed Action. Number 1. In general, notwithstanding any other provision of law, before taking any action described in paragraph 2, the President shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees and leadership a report that describes the proposed action and reasons for that action. Number 2. Actions described. A. In general, an action described in this paragraph is, number 1, an action to terminate the application of any sanctions described in subparagraph B. 2. With respect to sanctions described in subparagraph B imposed by the President with respect to a person, an action to waive the application of those sanctions with respect to that person, or number 3, a licensing action that significantly alters the United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation. B. Sanctions described. The sanctions described in this subparagraph are, number 1, sanctions provided for under number 1, this title or any provision of law amended by this title, including the executive orders codified under Section 222. Number 2, the support for sovereignty, integrity, democracy, and economic stability of Ukraine Act of 2014, 22 U.S.C. 8901, or number 3, the Ukraine Freedom Support Act of 2014, 22 U.S.C. 8921, and 2. The prohibition on access to the properties of the government of the Russian Federation located in Maryland and New York that the President ordered vacated on December 29, 2016. 3. Description of type of action. Each report submitted under paragraph 1 with respect to an action described in paragraph 2 shall include a description of whether the action A is not intended to significantly alter the United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation, or B, is intended to significantly alter United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation. 4. Inclusion of additional matter. A. In general, each report submitted under paragraph 1 that relates to an action that is intended to significantly alter United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation shall include a description of, number 1, the significant alteration to United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation, number 2, the anticipated effect of the action on the national security interests of the United States, and number 3, the policy objectives for which the sanctions affected by the action were initially imposed. B. Requests from banking and financial services committees. The Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate or the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives may request the submission to the committee of the matter described in clauses 2 and 3 of subparagraph A with respect to a report submitted under paragraph 1 that relates to an action that is not intended to significantly alter United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation. Number 5, confidentiality of proprietary information. Proprietary information that can be associated with a particular person with respect to an action described in paragraph 2 may be included in a report submitted under paragraph 1, only if the appropriate congressional committees and leadership provide assurances of confidentiality, unless such person or otherwise consents in writing to such disclosure. Number 6, rule of construction. Paragraph 2A.3 shall not be construed to require the submission of a report under paragraph 1 with respect to the routine issuance of a license that does not significantly alter the United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation. B. Period for review by Congress. In general, during the period of 30 calendar days beginning on the date on which the President submits a report under subsection A1, A, in the case of a report that relates to an action that is not intended to significantly alter the United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs of the Senate and the Committee on Financial Services of the House of Representatives should, as appropriate, hold hearings and briefings and otherwise obtain information in order to fully review the report, and B, in the case of a review that relates to an action that is intended to significantly alter United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation, the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate and the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives should, as appropriate, hold hearings and briefings and otherwise obtain information in order to fully review the report. Number 2, exception. The period for congressional review under paragraph 1 of a report required to be submitted under subsection A1 shall be 60 calendar days if the report is submitted on or after July 10th and on or before September 7th in any calendar year. Number 3, limitation on actions during initial congressional review period. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, during the period for congressional review provided for under paragraph 1 of a report submitted under subsection A1 proposing an action described in subsection A2, including any additional period for such review as applicable under the exception provided in paragraph 2. The President may not take that action unless a joint resolution of approval with respect to that action is enacted in accordance with Subsection C. And let's see how much longer until we have another section. You know, we're gonna pause really quick here at the let's see, the period for number 3 on limitation on actions during initial congressional review period, notwithstanding any. Yeah, we're gonna take a pause on number 3. We're on page 17 of 70, and it's 10:20 right now. I'm just taking a quick water break, so just one quick song, something off of 0 Days, and then we'll get back on track with this. And as I suspected, we're not going to get through all of this tonight, but we'll probably take some of it on Wednesday, or more of it on Wednesday. It might actually take all fucking week. I don't care. The people should be aware of this shit, because it directly affects you whether you realize it or not. I'm sure at some point or another we're going to get into the really juicy parts of it. And let's see here. As far as 0 Days, fuck it, let's go off the grid. And this is off of 0 Days by Prong here on Coin Metal. And that was Off the Grid by Prong. And yeah, that was off their latest one out, 0 Days. And yeah, like I said before, I don't think we're going to finish this whole thing this episode, but, you know, fuck, we got another 36 minutes, or, I don't know, like 32 minutes or something, because we always put in like a last dance. We like a last dance, you know? Anyway, let's get back into this thing. We were on page 17 of 70. Number 3, limitation on actions during initial congressional review period. Notwithstanding any other provision of law during the period for congressional review provided for under paragraph 1 of a report submitted under subsection A1 proposing an action described in subsection A2. You know what? I think we've actually read this part. Congressional No, you know, after a while, a lot of it starts to sound the same, because we covered, like, of the Russian Federation, of the Russian Federation, of the Russian Federation, of the IRGC, or whatever the fuck. Alright, let's start with number 3. Notwithstanding any other provision of law during the period for congressional review provided for under paragraph 1, a report submitted under subsection A1 proposing an action described in subsection A2, including any action period for such review as applicable under the exception provided in paragraph 2, the President may not take action unless a joint resolution of approval with respect to that action is enacted in accordance with subsection C. Number 4, limitation of actions during presidential consideration of a joint resolution of disapproval. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, if a joint resolution of disapproval relating to a report submitted under subsection A1 proposing an action described in subsection A2 passes both the House of Congress in accordance with subsection C, the President may not take that action for a period of 12 calendar days after the date of passage of the joint resolution of disapproval. Number 5, limitation on actions during congressional reconsideration of a joint resolution of disapproval. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, if a joint resolution of disapproval relating to a report submitted under subsection A1 proposing an action described in subsection A2 passes both houses of Congress in accordance with subsection C, and the President vetoes the joint resolution, the President may not take that action for a period of 10 calendar days after the date of the President's veto. 6. Effective enactment of a joint resolution of disapproval, notwithstanding any other provision of law, if a joint resolution of disapproval relating to a report
submitted under subsection A1, proposing an action described in subsection A2 is enacted in accordance with subsection C, the President may not take that action. C. Joint resolutions of disapproval or approval defined. In this subsection number 1, joint resolution of approval. The term, quote, joint resolution of approval means only a joint resolution of either House of Congress. A, the title of which is as follows: a joint resolution approving the President's proposal to take an action relating to the application of certain sanctions with respect to the Russian Federation, and B, the sole matter after the resolving clause of which is the following: quote, Congress approves of the action relating to the application of sanctions imposed with respect to the Russian Federation proposed by the President in these reports submitted to Congress under Section 216A1 of the Russian Sanctions Review Act of 2017 on, and then it's blank, relating to blank. Wow, that's pretty broad power there. With the first blank space being filled with the appropriate date and the second blank space being filled with a short description of the proposed action. Kill them! Number 2, joint resolution of disapproval. The term, quote, joint resolution of disapproval means only a joint resolution of either House of Congress. A, the title of which is as follows: quote, a joint resolution of disapproving the President's proposal to take an action relating to the application of certain sanctions with respect to the Russian Federation, and B, the sole matter after the resolving clause of which is the following: quote, Congress disapproves of the action relating to the application of sanctions imposed with respect to the Russian Federation proposed by the President in the report submitted to Congress under Section 216A1 of the Russia Sanctions Review Act of 2017 on blank relating to blank, with the first blank space filled with the appropriate date and the second blank space being filled with a short description of the proposed action. Number 3, introduction. During the period of 30 calendar days provided for under subsection B1, including any additional period as applicable under the exception provided in subsection B2, a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval may be introduced. A, in the House of Representatives by the Majority Leader or the Minority Leader, and B, in the Senate by the Majority Leader or the Majority Leader's designee, or the Minority Leader or the Minority Leader's designee. Number 4, floor consideration in the House of Representatives. If a committee of the House of Representatives to which a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval has been referred has not reported the joint resolution within 10 calendar days after the date of referral, that committee shall be discharged from further consideration of the joint resolution. Do your homework. Number 5, consideration in the Senate. A committee referral. A joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval introduced in the Senate shall be 1. Referred to the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs if the joint resolution relates to a report under subsection A3A that relates to an action that is not intended to significantly alter the United States foreign policy with regard to the Russian Federation, and 2. Referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations if the joint resolution relates to a report under subsection A3B that relates to an action that is intended to significantly alter the United States foreign policy with respect to the Russian Federation. B. Reporting and discharge. If the committee to which a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval was referred has not reported to the joint resolution within 10 calendar days after the date of referral of joint resolution, that committee shall be discharged from further consideration of the joint resolution, and the joint resolution shall be placed on the appropriate calendar. C. Proceeding to consideration. Notwithstanding Rule 22, I guess, of the standing rules of the Senate, it is in order at any time after the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs or the Committee on Foreign Relations, as the case may be, reports a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval to the Senate, or has been discharged from consideration of such a joint resolution, even though a previous motion to the same effect has been disagreed to move to proceed to the consideration of the joint resolution, and all points of order against the joint resolution and against consideration of the joint resolution are waived. The motion to proceed is not debatable. The motion is not subject to a motion to postpone. The motion to reconsider the vote by which the motion is agreed or disagreed to shall not be in order. D. Rulings of the chair on procedure. Appeals from the decisions of the chair relating to the application of the rules of the Senate, as the case may be, to the procedure relating to a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval shall be decided without debate. E. Consideration of veto messages. Debate in the Senate of any veto message with respect to a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval, including all debatable motions and appeals in connection with the joint resolution, shall be limited to 10 hours, to be equally divided between and controlled by the majority leader and minority leader or their designees. 6. Rules relating to Senate and House of Representatives. A. Treatment of Senate joint resolution in House. In the House of Representatives, the following procedures shall apply to a joint resolution of approval or a joint resolution of disapproval received from the Senate, unless the House has already passed a joint resolution relating to the same proposed action. Number 1, the joint resolution shall be referred to the appropriate committees. Number 2, if a committee to which a joint resolution has been referred has not reported the joint resolution within 2 calendar days after the date of referral, that committee shall be discharged from further consideration of the joint resolution. 3. Beginning on the third legislative day after each committee to which a joint resolution has been referred reports the joint resolution to the House or has been discharged from further consideration thereof, it shall be in order to move to proceed to consider the joint resolution in the House. All points of order against the motion are waived. Such a motion shall not be in order after the House has disposed of a motion to proceed on the joint resolution. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the motion to its adoption without intervening motion. The motion shall not be debatable. A motion to reconsider the vote by which the motion is disposed of shall not be in order. Number 4, the joint resolution shall be considered as read. All points of order against the joint resolution and against its consideration are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the joint resolution to final passage without intervening motion, except 2 hours of debate equally divided and controlled by the sponsor of the joint resolution or a designee and an opponent. A motion to reconsider the vote on passage of the joint resolution shall not be in order. B. Treatment of House Joint Resolution in Senate. 1. If before the passage by the Senate of a joint resolution of approving or joint resolution of disapproval, the Senate receives an identical joint resolution from the House of Representatives, the following procedures apply. Number 1. That joint resolution shall not be referred to a committee. Number 2. With respect to that joint resolution, AA. The procedure in the Senate shall be the same if no joint resolution had been received from the House of Representatives, but BB. The vote on passage shall be on the joint resolution from the House of Representatives. Number 2, if following passage of a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval in the Senate receives an identical joint resolution from the House of Representatives, that joint resolution shall be placed on the appropriate Senate calendar. 3. If a joint resolution of approval or a joint resolution of disapproval is received from the House, and no companion joint resolution has been introduced in the Senate procedures under this subsection shall apply to the House joint resolution. C. Application to revenue measures. The provisions of this paragraph shall not apply in the House of Representatives to a joint resolution of approval or joint resolution of disapproval that is a revenue measure. 7. Rules of House of Representatives and Senate. This subsection is enacted by Congress as an exercise of the rulemaking power of the Senate and the House of Representatives respectively, and, as such, is deemed a part of the rules of each House respectively, and supersedes other rules only to the extent that it is inconsistent with such rules, and B. with full recognition of the constitutional right of either House to change the rules so far as relating to the procedure of that House at any time in the same manner and to the same extent as in the case of any other rule of that House. D. Appropriate congressional committees and leadership defined. In this section, the term appropriate congressional committees and leadership means, number 1, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, the Committee on Foreign Relations, and the majority and minority leaders of the Senate, and number 2, the Committee on Financial Services, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the Speaker, the majority leader, and the minority leader of the House of Representatives. And we're going to go ahead and break this one off and flush it here at 1041 at Part 2 on page 21. Part 2, Sanctions with respect to the Russian Federation. And that'll be our starting point with on Wednesday. I'm just trying to select just a little bit of text here because I want to mark that as our starting point. So yeah, so far it's relatively unexciting with regard to us here in crypto, but I sense a deeper menace inside, and I'm sure we will explore it on the morrow, or on Wednesday rather. But for right now, dude, I've hardly played any music today. Really, I just chewing on that episode. Well, I shouldn't say hardly. I've had a couple music breaks, but I am going to take one more, and then we'll have a reflection or two, and then we'll be on to our last dance, and we'll cut it off there. But anyway, for right now, go ahead and throw down the title track, 0 Day. Oh, no. Wait. We're going to do the bonus track, Reasons to Be Fearful, here on Coin Metal. And that was Prong with Controller. Yeah, it's funny. I never know what song it's going to play when I flip back to one of these other directories. It's just like it picks a song and just like automatically plays it. So it's not really my fault that it was 2 Prong songs back to back. But we're actually going to end up closing out with one too. So sorry, I'm pronging y'all to death. But yeah, so Wednesday, probably not going to be playing much music, man. We got a lot of territory to cover, and so it's not gonna leave us a whole lot of room for playing around, you know, because I know there's some cryptocurrency stuff in there, and I want to ferret it out, and I certainly want to blab all about it here on this show. So, you know, it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna post this though. I mean, I suppose I could do it in a 2-parter or something like that. I mean, I don't know. It shouldn't take us much more than a full episode to get through it. I mean, because we actually started just this side of the halfway mark, and we managed to get through quite a bit of it. We got through about a third of it, I would say, or close to a third. So I have high hopes that if we have a full episode at our disposal, we'll be able to conquer that fucking dragon. Yeah, I don't understand why we're even bothering with Iran and Russia anymore. I mean, that kind of stuff seems like leftovers from a bygone era, honestly, and not terribly productive for our migration into the 21st century, honestly. I think our dependence on oil is at least 40 years too old. And, I mean, after the 70s, it should have been obvious that maintaining our dependence on oil was only going to lead to further issues further up the line. And we managed to get creative about licking the oil off the inner walls of the cavities we've sucked it out of, but even that's got a limited lifespan, and I believe we're already past the threshold of what we would consider positive returns, seeing as we've been doing most of the new fracking operations off banker money, which, I mean, is really, really neat short term. I mean, because you can cause all kinds of havoc in countries that are dependent on their oil revenue for their GDP, you know, like Bolivia or Venezuela or Iran or Russia or, you know, take a fucking pick, Libya. Although we don't have to worry about Libya anymore, right? You know, ISIS took control of Libya, and now supposedly, I guess, Benghazi is the fucking capital of it now, or something to that effect. I believe Tripoli is still recognized by the UN as the capital of Libya, but I'm not entirely sure on that, honestly. But anywho, yeah, like I said, so I mean, I don't mean to bring you guys down, but we are going to be reading legislation next time around. I try to make it enjoyable. I try to put a little bit of Easter eggs in here and there, and certainly my own stank. But you know, I think this stuff is important. You know, I think that people should understand the walls that are being erected around them. You know, I think that's one of the places where a lot of people in crypto have kind of gotten asleep at the wheel. You know, there's been this impression that just because they can't stop transactions, that they won't try arresting people and putting people in jail and shooting people. I mean, it's like that possibility doesn't come up, you know? But I can almost guarantee
sometime on Wednesday, we're going to come across some shit that will apply it to us in blankets. You know, it's not going to be specific about what they're targeting or who they're targeting or whatever, but they'll be able to imply by inference that we're somehow involved in terrorism or trying to facilitate aid to Russia or Iran or some shit. Give me a fucking break, man. This shit is so 1950s and so over and done with that, like I said, it's a waste of fucking money. You know, you're going to end up legislating yourselves into a fucking box, and the rest of the world is just going to keep going around us. And sure, we've got military might and whatnot, but even that requires sustenance. And you know, here we are on the threshold of fucking 3D printing. Our GDP's stagnant. Our fucking our manufacturing base is trying to figure out whether it wants to shit or completely leave America. So, yeah, it's not an opportune time to be talking about, you know, instituting a third world war, because in all honesty, that's what you're trying to do. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. But hopefully we'll be able to get outside the gate far enough that our impact on it will be that it's simply defunded. The priorities of people that are transacting the funds of the future, or the 21st century rather, will not be concerned with maintaining the CENTCOM budget, or AFRICOM, or NORCOM, or whatever the fucking com. It's just not going to be in their interest in any way, shape, or form. The value proposition just isn't there to project military might over people that really don't have any impact on you. You know, and in the meantime, you're wasting money. Instead, you could be investing in future defensive capabilities, or offensive capabilities, as the case may be. Either way, let's go ahead and close this one out. We will be back again Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want you to trade safe, man, because it is freaky out there. A lot of chance for you to make money, a lot of chance to get wrecked. It's the same coin, man. You're flipping it every time. And I want you to do your homework, as we are doing on the show, and we will be doing again on Wednesday. And I want you to watch out for your bunghole, because just because it's not illegal today doesn't mean it won't be tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. And as far as our last dance, fuck it, 0 Days. This is the title track off of Prong's latest album, 0 Days, here on Coin Metal. Thanks again for listening, and y'all have an excellent evening.